You're watching NRA TV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Los Angeles, California. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mike Show. Hot Mike, unfortunately, cannot be here today. He's got a photo shoot. He's actually got a recurring gig. He plays, it's a photo character for Harlequin Romances. He plays Trantor, the Algerian pirate, and they've got a new book coming out. I think it's Trantor and the Ohio Housewife, something like that. In any event, he's at a photo shoot today, so we won't be able to make it. Hope to see him tomorrow. Today, our topic is censorship, but the kind of censorship that is actually the most pernicious kind of censorship of all, and that's what I like to call invisible censorship. It's the kind of censorship that happens without you really knowing about it. Our government was structured almost 250 years ago, was structured in such a way that government censorship, even today, is virtually impossible. The checks and balances built into the Constitution and the veneration of the First Amendment, generally speaking, by both Democrats and Republicans, has kept the idea of government censorship pretty much in check, with one or two exceptions. Actually, it's not even censorship in that case. I'm thinking of Dinesh D'Souza and the filmmaker that made the movie that Hillary Clinton blamed Benghazi on. But in terms of the government saying, no, you can't publish that, or in terms of the government's pulling, programs off the air, that doesn't seem to really happen, not for political reasons anyway. They certainly used to censor for profanity, and I suppose they still do. The kind of censorship that we're facing today has got an awful lot to do with the fact that new media, social media, which is essentially internet media, is not something that can be controlled. There's not something that the FCC can control. It's not something that the ABC censors can control. It's a pretty much wide open free-for-all. That comes with a downside, certainly. There's some lunatics out there, and there's some nastiness, some genuine hateful people out there. But the bottom line fact is that the internet was designed to survive a nuclear attack. It was built in such a way so that information would be sent out in multiple different packets, and they'd all arrive at the destination, and they'd be checked and so on. So it's virtually impossible to bring it down. Now, this presents a problem if you're a power-hungry totalitarian statist, because those pesky citizens out there now have the means to talk directly to each other, not having to go through multi-million-dollar studios with approval from the Federal Communications Commission and so on. The nerve of those great unwashed hordes of knuckle-dragging savages. They can actually speak to each other one-to-one directly on the internet in very much the same fashion that we're doing now, and certainly in the same fashion that I've been doing at BillWhittle.com for 7 or 8 years now. I've got, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 videos on various places, and somebody did a calculation, and I've had 50 million views on YouTube. Now, most of those is me checking the counter to see how many views I've got, but nevertheless, it's still a pretty big number. So the question then becomes, how do you censor this? If you are a left-wing totalitarian, how do you stop something this egalitarian? How do you stop something this open, this robust, this almost infinite in terms of size? Well, you got to do it somehow, because as we're about to find out today, if conservatives have a chance to get into an argument, anything looking remotely like a fair fight with the left goes down. So that fight has to be prevented. Now, YouTube has actually started a censorship program, as you can see from the video here. And as always, they're masking it in the fig leaf of virtue. Basically, what they're saying is they're going to be cracking down on hate speech and fake news. And here's the problem with YouTube cracking down on hate speech and fake news. It's the same problem with censorship of any kind anywhere. And the problem is, who decides what is censorship? Who decides what is fake news? Who decides what is hate speech? Look, folks, it's pretty simple, really. Free speech is either free or it's not. It's not free, but it's not kind of free. It's not free on Saturdays. It's free or it's not. When you have freedom of speech, you will get some obnoxious, hateful, disgusting, disgraceful, obscene, awful, awful, awful content. And that is the price you pay. Because if you don't, then somebody has to make a decision. You know, as a little boy, I it's a long story. I'll try to keep it short as possible. I was 5, 6-year-old boys when I was growing up, drew pictures of airplanes, you know, and World War II was not too far behind us. So I grew up in the mid-'60s. My dad was a World War II vet. And I drew pictures of American airplanes shooting down German planes and stuff and the bullets coming out. And so I was drawing a German plane, and I was trying to get the swastika on the wing right, because if you're a young kid, a swastika is a little difficult to draw. So I practiced on my hand. I came home one day, my dad saw a swastika drawn on my hand, and that's about the only time I've ever seen him like all the way angry. It took my mom to explain to him that he's just, you know, basically trying to do this for the drawings because my dad fought against the Nazis. Here's why I tell that story. Many, many years later, when the Nazis were marching in, was it Skokie, I want to say, Illinois? I remember thinking, my God, my dad is going to want these people just banned. He's just going to say, lock them up. And he said, no, Bill, we can't lock them up. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, they got to march. What? Yeah, they got to march, because the problem is, if we say that the Nazis can't march, then who decides who can march and who can't? Who decides? And if somebody can decide, then we're done. We're finished. That stayed with me. So somebody wants to censor YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the rest, and they're doing it, and in a moment we'll get to how. But I'll tell you who wants to censor it. It's people like John Podesta. You may remember John Podesta. He's the guy who basically, during Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Podesta's the guy who said, let's pay people to go to Donald Trump protests and violently disrupt them, and that way we can make Trump look like a bunch of, Trump supporters look like a bunch of violent lunatics. And Podesta's also the guy who kind of, you know, made sure that Bernie Sanders didn't win the nomination. John Podesta is an evil man who belongs in jail. And I don't think there's much question about that. But let me just quote, I'm quoting directly from this Breitbart article from a day or two ago, where John Podesta says that social media companies should police fake news. The direct quotes from the Breitbart article. This is Podesta speaking. I think that, again, the social media companies have a responsibility to try to do a better job of knocking off fake sites and be able to police, to some extent, the propagation of fake news. So, Podesta thinks that social media companies have a responsibility to knock off fake news sites and police content. Who decides what's a fake news site, John? Can we agree that CNN is a fake news site? You know, CNN, the company that gave your candidate debate questions ahead of the debate and gave her an incredibly unfair advantage. You know, that company, the company that James O'Keefe has video of executives saying, no, the whole Russia story it's nothing there. It's really just fake news. Is that who you're talking about? You're talking about social media as being sure that CNN is kicked off of the internet, make sure that Facebook doesn't run any CNN videos, that YouTube isn't showing any CNN content. Is that the kind of fake news you're talking about, John? Just curious, just trying to get the situation straightened out. He said that the propagation of fake news was a national security threat, complaining that, quote, Russian bots and trolls, unquote, helped spread negative stories about Hillary Clinton across the internet. Let's just say that's true for a second. What if it was Russian bots and trolls that spread stories of Hillary Clinton storing national security secrets on an illegal server, and that she contacted people, including the President of the United States, illegally in direct violation of federal law? Those the kind of trolls that you're talking about, John? The kind of trolls that spread stories like that, which we used to refer to as the truth, and the uncovering of which used to be the job of the press? That the kind of thing you're talking about? A couple other things here. He said that he admitted that it might be impossible to fully police content on social media, and that was, quote, a problem that would have to be fought within the American democracy. You know, that American democracy that John Podesta would so desperately like to get rid of, because the American democracy that John Podesta wants to patrol and police is the same American democracy that put him and his miserable low-life boss out of a job. They should all be in jail. That democracy, that's the one he wants to have a little problem with. He says you can't just ignore it. You have to deal with it and come to terms with it, offering advice for future Democratic candidates. By the way, if you're a future Democratic candidate, by all means, speaking as a Republican, please take all of the advice from John Podesta that you possibly can. And finally, he basically said that Hillary Clinton's campaign failed to use social media as effectively as President Barack Obama did, that these channels were flooded with information from dubious sources, and that the Clinton campaign didn't do enough to fight back. John, the dubious sources that you're talking about are journalists. They're not CNN journalists. They're not real-world media journalists. They're individual citizens who uncovered your incredible violations of federal law. No wonder you want socialism. No wonder you want socialism. Censorship, both. Real censorship, the dangerous censorship, is the kind of censorship you don't realize is even happening. So now that I've gotten that out of my system, let's bring in a guest who really has a very, very deep and clear insight into this. Our friend Craig Strazzeri is the Chief Marketing Director for Prager University. We have a lot of friends in common, do a lot of work together. Prager is a titan, and Prager University was a determined, extremely well-produced effort to take fundamental civic issues and portray them as accurately as possible. And if you're going to tell the truth to the American people, that's something that has to be stopped right quick, isn't it, Craig?
That's exactly right. Well, thank you for having me on, Bill. This last week just marked the 1-year anniversary when PragerU team discovered that YouTube is restricting over 20 of our videos. And for those of you who haven't seen the PragerU videos, they're very educational in nature. They're animated with a well-known presenter talking about topics like, why did America fight the Korean War? That's one of the videos that YouTube does not want young people to see, which is actually just laughable. They hide behind, excuses of algorithms and, community flagging. But I've actually had some interesting conversations with YouTube staff members recently, and I've learned some telling information that's actually even more scary than we initially thought in terms of how deliberate this is.
You have had conversations with YouTube staffers. Can you give me, before I go on, can you give me just 2 or 3 more titles of the kind of things that have been age restricted? In other words, these are the kind of things that cannot be seen by anyone under the age of 18. And so we're crystal clear on this, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about people who are having a political conversation. There's not so much as a damn in them, I'll bet you. There certainly is no word that you wouldn't feel comfortable speaking at your Thanksgiving dinner at home, and the people that watch the show are the finest people in America. What are some of the other titles that they've restricted to 18 years or older, Craig?
Yeah, so there's 28 of them, so I'll name off a few. The least diverse place in America, which is about the lack of diversity of thought on college campuses. Why America Must Lead. Who's more pro-choice, Europe or America? Who not to vote for. That was a very comedic video with Adam Carolla, just basically talking about don't vote for the guy who says, I'll fight for you, and who just promises you everything, which is, there is absolutely no reason that should be censored.
Craig, hold on right there. This is really, really important. The one you just mentioned, because I've seen the Adam Carolla video. It's terrific. When he says, in the video, when he says who not to vote for, does he say don't vote for Hillary Clinton?
No.
Of course not, because that would be a violation of your 501c3 status, and you'd have to be a 501c4. So, folks, let's just be clear on this. A comedian has a video at Prager University, a well-known comedian, well-known and popular comedian, saying don't vote for the person who's making you all of these promises because they're just using it to get political power. There's not a curse word in it, and YouTube has decided that that kind of material cannot be seen by anybody under the age of 18. Is that fair, Craig, what I just said?
That's exactly right. And so when we first discovered this, the first response YouTube gave us was that, there's an algorithm that detects keywords that are inappropriate or objectionable, and restricted mode is meant to keep kids from watching pornographic or violent content. Anyone who's seen our videos, again, will obviously know that our videos are neither violent nor pornographic. And so recently I went to YouTube's offices in New York. They had invited a lot of conservative organizations out to YouTube, and they specifically said with a smile on their face, if you are having any issues with your channel that you want to bring up, we're here for you. We want to help get them resolved. So I raised my hand and said, well, we are having an issue at PragerU. You're restricting 28 of our videos, which is making it nearly impossible for young people to see them. And there's no reason that they should be restricted. They're educational in nature, very appropriate. The only reason they seem to be restricted are that we are conservative and have conservative ideas. And so their response, again, hid behind algorithms and community flagging. But very recently, so 2 days ago, we got a call from YouTube saying after a manual review, so meaning they had actual people at YouTube rewatch the 28 videos that we appealed as being restricted, After they rewatch them, people at YouTube, I keep saying it because it's actually hard to believe, they said, yes, these videos should be restricted. Young people should not see them. So when we pressed them further, I pressed them on the specific topic of why America fought in the Korean War. They said, well, YouTube is a family-safe environment, and war is not a family-safe topic. So, I mean, as
is that right?
As
Let me just stop you right there. War is not a family-safe topic on YouTube. Is that right? Well, I would like to have somebody take a quick count of the number of video game playing segments there are on YouTube. I want to know how many people are being knifed in the throat in Call of Duty on YouTube right now. I'll bet you anything that 10,000 videos like that are added every single day to YouTube. Every single day. Family-friendly place where we don't want to get people upset about war. You go to YouTube and look at some of these gaming channels, and you will see the most unbelievable, appalling acts of violence, and they're being narrated by 15-year-olds, and they're getting 60 million views. That takes a lot of nerve, Craig. That takes a lot of nerve for them to say that to your face.
It does, and I even took it a step further, and I let them know on the Korean War specifically, I'm in restricted mode. I turned on the filter to see, and I typed in Korean War. Not only did I find several videos on the Korean War, not PragerU's because that was restricted, but there are videos on the Korean War from left-leaning sites like Crash Course, for example, that make similar short animated videos on the same topic that they say is so forbidden on YouTube, and they still show up under restricted mode when it's from a left-leaning perspective. So it's just, we didn't have many doubts to begin with, the lack of rational response from them over the last year since we've identified this issue, but now it's just absolutely clear they don't like us because we're conservative. They don't like us because we're successful. Last year, we had 250 million views. This year, we already have over 350 million views. We have over 2 million views every single day with our PragerU videos, and they're reaching young people. That's our main demographic. So YouTube doesn't like that we're so easily reaching the next generation, and we're actually having an impact. So what do? They slow it down by restricting 28 of our videos and making them a little harder to access for young people.
I'm going to use some language that you never would find in a Prager University, but those miserable low-life bastards. We're going to be back in 2 minutes after the break, and we'll continue this discussion with our friend Craig Strazzeri. He's the Chief Marketing Officer for PragerU. We're talking about invisible censorship on the Hot Mic Show right here on NRA TV.